Hello, everybody, and welcome to PEI's Open House. This session on how economic inclusion contributes to climate resilient development has been organized jointly with GIZ's Aspects webinar series. So welcome again, and thank you for taking the time to join us today. My name is Pooja Datta with PEI, and I'll be your moderator today. But before we dive into the session, some housekeeping and some background on the series. So first, for those of you who've been with us before, you know we like this to be a really engaging, interactive session. So please do introduce yourself in the chat box, ask questions, raise issues with the speakers, share your own experience where relevant. Please keep the chat box live. There's also simultaneous interpretation. If you click on the global icon at the bottom of your screen, you can get you can hear the presentations in Arabic, French, Portuguese, Spanish, and English. So please select that. Even if your default language is English, please do select your preferred language on that icon. Also, please note all the presentations, any resources shared in the chat box, and the recording will be shared with all of you at the end of after the webinar. So thanks very much again. And for those of you who are new to PEI's Open House, let me give you a little bit of the background of what we try to do here. We pull together experts, global and country experts that engage in strategic thinking around economic inclusion programming and policies on key issues. We use this also as a way of sharing innovations across countries and facilitating a discussion around these things. So today we have a stellar panel as always, and we'll start with Dr. Kirsten Imbush. She's the Deputy Head of Division at the Federal Ministry of Economic Cooperation and Development, BMC. Dr. Imbush is going to situate today's conversation in the context of the key messages from COP27. This is a very critical and important agenda. Over to you, Dr. Imbush. You have 5 minutes. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much to Pooja. And as she has introduced me, I don't have to say any words about myself. But what I would like to tell you is why we as BMZ find it very relevant to have this seminar today, both as a donor agency, but also as a partner to the PEI, in fact. Yeah, let me assure you that the topic and the timing of this webinar, it could not be better. 2 weeks ago, the COP27 took place in Egypt. And once again, it has brought to the world's attention that despite global mitigation and adaptation efforts, significant climate risks still remain. So we urgently need to deal with questions such as how often and how fiercely these climate events will occur, who is affected most, and most importantly, how are we prepared to cope with their impact? Specifically, the poorest and most vulnerable suffer the harshest consequences, but they have the least capacity to cope. And their struggle to earn a living and create sustainable livelihoods is made more difficult in the face of climate change. By 2030, climate change-related losses and damages could have pushed an additional 30 to 130 million people into extreme poverty. And moreover, studies show that women disproportionately suffer the impacts of climate change. Poverty, gender, and climate change are closely intertwined. At this year's COP, the role of social protection for the climate agenda has received a lot more attention than in the past, and rightly so. Social protection can substantially contribute to strengthening the resilience of individuals, households, and communities. And it can also transform gender roles. This is the message that German Development Minister Svenja Schulze also sent recently at the World Bank's annual meeting. And there we were encouraging both bilateral and multilateral actors to intensify cooperation and coordination for social protection in support of partner countries. One concerted effort in this respect is the Global Shield Against Climate Risks that was launched at COP27. The Global Shield's aim is to provide more systematic, coherent, and sustained financial and social protection, and to scale up international support for the poorest and most vulnerable. social protection approaches are a key element of the global shield. However, moving forward, it is first and foremost essential to strengthen and expand social protection to the 4 billion people worldwide who currently have to cope with crises without any access to social protection. And it will be critical for social protection programs and systems to be designed to incorporate climate adaptation and mitigation measures. The adaptive social protection approach, ASP approach, is responding to this challenge by linking social protection measures to climate change adaptation and disaster risk management. And then I'm sure that Christian Bodewijk will tell us about this later on. As said in the beginning, Germany is glad to support the Partnership for Economic Inclusion, not least because it contributes to women economic empowerment and climate resilience. Economic inclusion programs are well positioned to support green, resilient, and inclusive development. They often build on social protection systems and take a multidimensional approach, combining different types of measures such as cash transfers, training, coaching, market access, and other services. These interventions are designed to be flexible, to meet local needs, and to adapt to new challenges such as climate change. A few countries have already started to leverage the opportunities social protection offers to contribute to climate resilient development. And I'm very much looking forward to now learn about the examples of Egypt, India, as well as the Sahel region. For German Development Cooperation, this webinar provides a great platform. First, for reflecting on how economic inclusion programs can address climate change priorities, and second, sharing practical lessons while moving forward this cross-sectoral agenda. With having said that, I thank you very much for your attention and I hope we're going to have a good meeting today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kirsten. And it's very interesting to hear how you situate today's conversation in the messages and the urgency that's emerging from the COP discussion. I'd like to take a few minutes of your time to share with you some of the thinking that we've been doing within PEI, working closely with climate and social protection and jobs experts, Manan Donahue and Cecilia Costella, to advance our thinking in this space and to think about how we can systematically take some of these innovations in climate resilient economic inclusion, how can we take this to scale, and how can we think about this in a more systematic way? Next, please, Claudia. Thank you. So as Kirsten explained, there's been, and as all of us in this room are familiar, there's a huge paradigm shift towards a focus on climate resilient development. The messages from COP, the recent IPCC report, and within the bank as well, an alignment towards green, resilient, inclusive development and the strategies, sectoral and overall, that have emerged to align with this global shift in our paradigm. Next, please. And the reason for the shift, again, as Kirsten explained, the impact on the poorest, on women, is huge. These are our target populations for our programs. So looking at this nexus of climate change, poverty, and gender is hugely important because climate change is disproportionately affected the poorest. It's affecting women because of their high exposure to shocks, to climate shocks, their dependence for food security on the agricultural sector, and on climate-sensitive livelihoods. So clearly, this is a call for action for those of us working on economic inclusion. And in that context, again, when we started to think about, well, how do we start to situate economic inclusion programs and policies to contribute to climate resilient development? There's a unique strength that these programs have in that they combine the need for human systems transitions with ecosystem transitions. If you look at the figure on the right, that sort of really reflects the need for all of these transitions to happen together in order to move towards climate resilient development. And economic inclusion programs are typically targeted at those most affected, the poorest, mostly women, who are most impacted, but are also often stewards for environmental change. These programs focus on building incomes and assets, all of which contributes to longer-term resilience. And as Kirsten mentioned, these are multidimensional programs, so they try to address multiple barriers at the same time, and so are very flexible in incorporating climate resilience in the design of what they offer target population. Next, please. Keeping that potential in mind, we decided our starting point was to take a look at what does the universe of economic inclusion programs look like? What do these programs typically do? And it was very encouraging. When we looked at the portfolio of World Bank programs, we found about 57% of these programs already include some climate elements. And a lot of this is focused on shock response, but there's also quite a few projects that focus on improving resource management or agri-food value chains. So there's quite some experience that we can draw upon there, but it's patchy. So there's variations across locations, urban versus rural, variation across regions within this broad experience. There's a lot going on among PEI partners as well, who are really leading important innovations in this space. GIZ, of course, there's Concern is transforming its strategy. FAO is working on food systems transitions, CGAP and BRAC as well. So there's a lot that we were able to look at and see how our partners are approaching and thinking about climate resilient economic inclusion. Taking all of that in, we tried to think about how do we systemize this? What are the pathways that can help learn from these innovations and help governments take these to scale? So the starting point, of course, is the context, and really this idea of very interconnected climate and poverty risks, all of it with a gender lens throughout as well. So in this context where these intertwined risks entrench poverty and limit climate resilience, they undermine livelihoods and food security, what is the kind of response that's possible? And again, for us, what was important was to start thinking about basic principles that climate resilient economic inclusion programs should incorporate. An important aspect is to do no harm. This is something that our programs have always had, but the caveat here would be that do no harm also means do no environmental harm, which was something relatively new to some programs. And it really important at minimum to align poverty and climate objectives together. Going beyond these minimum requirements, it's important to also be strategic and be cognizant of contextualizing to local risks, to be very well integrated with broader social policy, and to be even more collaborative than these programs typically are, and maybe explore partnerships outside our traditional partners, say with the private sector, etc. Programs that incorporate these principles and have climate elements, we thought we could categorize these into three groups, three program areas. There's adaptive safety net that was mentioned, and we'll hear more about. Food and ecosystems, and green livelihoods and jobs. And I'll come back to these in a minute. But going from left to right, from context to response across these three program areas, the idea is that all of these programs contribute to a human systems and ecosystem transition, which leads to improved climate outcomes, which is the long-term goal. Next, please, Claudia. Thank you. On the three strategic program examples, adaptive safety nets is one we're all quite familiar with. We'll hear from Christian on the Sahel experience of programs that specifically aim to enhance the absorptive capacity of households that operate with groups and areas that are at high risk of climate change, and that facilitate disaster risk reduction. From Dr. Athif, we'll hear a little bit more about programs that improve or make food systems that support food systems and ecosystems and help to move us towards more resilient agricultural and livelihood practices. Other types of programs actually protect and restore ecosystems as well. And the third category is on green livelihoods and jobs, and that help facilitate the green transition, that increase employment in green jobs. And this would be the experience from India as well, from green public works programs that also generate community assets that contribute to improving national resource management. Next. So with that framework in mind, we also are very conscious of the fact that this is a nascent and emerging area. There's a lot that we do not know. And the hope is that we can work together to work on two fronts. One is thinking about how do we operationalize climate resilient economic inclusion, really to ramp up how PEI can support this agenda is by ramping up country engagement and really try to integrate economic inclusion within bank operations, but also strengthening partnerships and collaborations internally and externally. The second area would be on advancing our knowledge of the innovations and really building an evaluative learning agenda. What are the adaptations that support these objectives? What really works? Testing these and sharing lessons on the kinds of responses that both support, that combine climate and poverty objectives, that avoid maladaptation, and so on. So this is a huge agenda. And we hope that we would continue to have conversations like today's to start to advance on both the operational and learning agenda in parallel forward. Next. So that was it for me on the framing. And I hope, please, if you have questions, shifting back to my moderator role from the presenter role, please do share questions on the framing. This is we are still at a stage where we are soliciting feedback, so please do tell us what you think and whether this resonates with the work that you're doing in your programs. But with that framing in mind, let me turn to our country experiences. First is Dr. Atif El-Shabrawi, who's with the Ministry of Social Solidarity in Egypt. Dr. Atif is going to be sharing the experience of Forza, and the climate and how that's been adapted to be more climate resilient economic inclusion. Thank you, Dr. Atif. Over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Pooja, for introducing that excellent presentation. I'm really happy to be here for the second year for presenting our experience in Egypt for Forza program. I'm very happy to also share some of the last kind of achievements we do. In fact, to go quickly, as Pooja mentioned, and our colleague from Germany mentioned some words regarding the COP27. I was really personally interested to participate and to enrich that kind of huge event. What I can mention that personally that the COP27 was really an opportunity where we talked about implementation. Every leaders were mentioning implementation is now. We heard about the funding, climate justice, and the first time kind of debate for climate swap and the fund for the countries who are more affected, mostly poor countries. We heard about the billions and a lot of discussion were extremely interesting discussion in most of financial institutions. There were plenty of financial institutions, not only the World Bank as a leader, but was a lot of people talking about how to fund and how to finance. Talking about the Egyptian agenda in COP27, Egypt was, let's say, prepared for the COP27 as a host. So we noticed kind of focus and successful example of agriculture innovation and food security measures Egypt had been taken since about 5 or 7 years. There were kind of call for shifting the sustainable climate resistant agricultural system all over the Egyptian territory. There are a huge initiative to fight the scarcity of water and to change the whole agricultural system and increasing the productivity.
Dr. Atif, sorry to interrupt, but would you mind sharing your screen with the presentation?
I'm sorry,
We can't see it, sorry.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I will share it from the beginning. Sorry.
No worries, we can see it now. Thank you.
Is clear now? I'm sorry for that.
No, we can see it now. Thank you. Maybe you could put it on presentation mode. Perfect. Perfect.
Okay. Okay, so I was just mentioning the agenda of COP27 and some of the remarks regarding what was some keystones of points. I was willing to talk about it. Egypt also launched kind of initiative we call a climate response to sustaining peace initiative, which was a kind of African initiative. Also presented 7 initiatives for Africa for the climate change and fighting the consequences. I noticed really a huge participation from the NGO part. We have a separate pavilion for the NGOs from Egypt and from the African continent. About 2,000 persons, probably 10,000 were registered. I don't know exactly 2,000 probably participating. And FORSA program presented the some of outcomes of the philosophy. Fortunately, we implemented since the beginning of 2020, where we marrying together the food system or the economic inclusion. So I'm very enthusiastic regarding the outcomes of the COP27. I feel that the coming months will see more accurate and outcomes results. So if I focus quickly regarding what we do in Egypt. I mean, Egypt as a big country has launched an economic reform in 2015, and parallel to the economic reform, launched a new cash transfer or safety net program. We call it Takafa and Karama. Since 2015, the program started to increase, and currently we have about 4.1 million households, representing about 20 million individuals. Plus 20 other million individuals who are not in the system or graduated or rejected. So we have a database of about 40 million individuals currently in our database. 80% of beneficiaries are in rural areas, either in Upper Egypt or in Delta. About 78% of beneficiaries are women. 43% of them are in working age. I noticed also something which I put it here in the beginning, that all the studies mentioning that poor people spend about between 60 to 80% of their income on food. So the climate change is worsening their situation, and probably for this reason we were starting to design FORSA in early 2020 based on the an offer and demand in local rural areas, and particularly use what we call it in the history, in Egyptian history, productive villages, and how we try to think about how to use resilient villages. So FORSA program was designed to accommodate the characteristics of people who are just mentioning here as a unique ecosystem to help working age Takafa and Karama beneficiary and rejected, engaging in sustainable economic activity through 2 major directions: innovative scheme based on a value-added sustainable business model, and partnership with private sector leading NGOs. In fact, the program was designed from day one to be linked sustainably with private sector and value chain in the rural area. We target 50,000 households. I'm happy to mention that since last year, we already contracting about 40,000 households who are currently in implementation in 8 governorates in Egyptian territory, which is a huge amount of activities. We called last year 130,000 household representatives, about 2 per household for a behavior change session, which giving a result of 75% of acceptance to enroll in the program. So we didn't make the enrollment obligatory, we make it an option within the behavior change to incentivize and let people come with their own grade. So I will focus here in some particular initiative linking to our discussion today, where we talk about resilience and climate change and food system. I will take it into 3 levels. In fact, the first, we had kind of 3 levels of intervention: level and individual level, and collective and job creation, as the program is giving 2 options: asset transfer or job or wage employment. So we focus in going through the Egyptian, rural villages, we try to find where we can create value, when we can create sustainable activity which make huge amount of money, not huge, but at least twice the amount of welfare. So to the left hand, we have the breeding normal Egyptian cattle, which is not really a wealthy activity, which is not running, which not making a lot of income. So we have now an initiative with 2 other ministries to import kind of breeding cattle for higher quality, higher productivity, which makes about 3 to 5 times the productivity of the Egyptian cattle. This is one initiative. We have another initiative, which we call it border governorates in Egypt. Egypt is a huge territory with about 4 big governorates in the borders, and we focus in giving breeding sheep and goats, and we try always to make that kind of value chain. So we give it to the families. In each case, we have about breeding cattle and sheep. We have about 6,000 families. So we try to make the mass production. So each time we have to give the projects, we have to make it in a group where we can also resell after and supporting them and reselling their. We have another level of intervention in a collective way. We call it productive units. You know that in rural Egyptian areas, we have plenty of agriculture crops, and most of time Egypt is exporting raw crops, raw fruits and vegetables. So we try to create wherever is possible kind of collective working space. So we have about between 30 to 50 household representative in one unit. We have here an example from left, a unit where we recycle the palm tree waste and make handicraft and make gifts and make what you see as example. And this is very successful. And we have now working with people who are designing a very high ranked model of handicraft bags and shoes and that. The second one, which is very a good example of beekeeping and honey bee products. And we have one central unit where we have 100 women who are coming to a group of 10. Each 10 will stay about 1 or 2, 3 months to learn how can they start to the profession of beekeeping, and we give them each woman 10 cells. So at the end we have 100 women who are producing honey, and the unit is producing marketing and branding the honey for them. So they have just to produce. And another example, which artichoke, wherever we have a big governorate in the north of Egypt producing massively artichoke, so we created units where we have about 240 women in working in one group, in one unit, where they come to clean and packing the artichoke. We have another example which was very nice as a start in Forza. This kind of value chain, we have a massive value chain of 410 families in 2 neighborhood villages where we start to give 100 chicken for eggs per each women. All are women and all are beneficiary of the welfare system. And they reach kind of between 40 and 50,000 eggs per day. And this create a value chain, and we start to have those 2 villages working and specialized in egg production. Probably the war currently is increasing the price of some items, and we know the value. We have also a concentration of women rural development economic empowerment initiative, and this is an initiative with FAO in one governorate, when we create 800 women micro enterprise, and all are rural and all are working with their houses and their families. So this kind of productive villages, again, just to keep the time, one of the initiative was green jobs. So we are organizing succession of work fair in areas where we have to, the massive agriculture activity in Egypt is also massive intensive labor. So we have a lot of companies who are recruiting young ladies and boys for the agriculture activities. And so we focus on the green jobs wherever we can recycle and the kind of activity of the harvest. I will stop just before to end in the concluding remark due to the time. In fact, what we try to do in Egypt, we try to have this kind of innovative initiative focusing in developing the food production system and reactivate the productive villages. You know, in the history, every small village in Egypt were producing their own food. With a change of the consumption model in the 80s and 90s, we became all consumers. So now we try to focus in thinking and doing rapid market assessment. Each time we go for a village, we do a rapid market assessment where is the exact value added to be added within the ecosystem which we design, and we bring an NGO to manage it. The deployed efforts align it fully with the national key climate resilience strategy. So we are boosting green jobs, access to finance and scale, and supporting livelihood diversification, particularly in the area affected by the most. You know that many examples of Egypt agriculture activities are hurted and unfortunately impacted by the crisis in water and climate change. If we make small stop on the next step, we see that still more resources and effort are needed to move the climate agenda forward in terms of enhance the coordination across ministries. The Ministry of Social Solidarity, the owner of FORSA program, is taking a massive collaborative approach with Ministry of Planning, Ministry of Environment, Ministry of Finance. You know, we do also hire Council of Women because most of our clients are women, Ministry of Local Development. We try to have that kind of strong coordination to maximize the use of resources. We also enhance the coordination with private sector. I mean, we are the only ministry, probably social development, who have about 30 MOUs with private sector in Egypt. We have MOUs with the biggest Federation of Industries, Federation of Business Association in Egypt, who are bringing the jobs for us and also bringing the know-how for certain units. We try to enhance the capabilities of NGOs. We focus in giving more capacity building for NGOs. All our programs are implemented through NGOs. Now we are opening to private sector to implement some of our initiatives where we don't have the proper capabilities of the NGOs. And finally, we try to look for how to enhance and integrate the FORSA program within the Ministry of Social Solidarity, where the program is taking a pure economic and developmental agriculture innovation approach, which is not classically in the Ministry of Social Solidarity. So Ministry of Social Solidarity now is opening a new department for economic empowerment. We changed the name and brand of the safety net department to become economic empowerment department. We have in each directorate of the Ministry of Social Solidarity, we have an office for FORSA for economic empowerment. So the FORSA program is also converted the brand and the image of the Ministry of Social Solidarity to be one of the ministries who are working in the ground in rural areas and giving people the hope either for jobs or for kind of asset transfer, as I mentioned, through either value chain or productive units. I stop here and really I thank you for your time, and back to you, Pooja.
Thank you very much, Dr. Atif. That was covering a lot of ground and an extremely interesting program to hear about. We have a number of clarificatory questions in the chat box, which I think we can come back to in the Q&A session. For now, maybe I'll just raise one of the questions, Dr. Atif, to you from the chat. You talked about partnerships, including with NGOs and others, and one of the questions from the chat box is to ask what exactly is the role and the purpose of these NGOs? What tasks do they perform within the FORSA program? If you could just give us a quick overview. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for the question, Pooja. In fact, traditionally, the NGOs are a partner of Ministry of Social Affairs, Ministry of Social Development, and Ministry of Social Solidarity, or the poverty alleviation program worldwide. What we try to do in Egypt, we try to focus in uplifting certain number of NGOs to be very professional, very like I wouldn't say in Western countries, but like non-for-profit organizations. So we try to, from one side, to upscale their capabilities. So we have collaboration to train NGOs on the model of what we mentioned. We are training 100 NGOs to be the implementer agency of the Forza, because we work in only value chain and productive unit. We don't work in individual entrepreneurship. So this model is new for the NGO. So we designed the intervention. We have collaborative work with most of FAO, UNIDO, ILO, the great implementing agency and economic development. We design the intervention. We do a contractual arrangement with the NGO to implement the intervention under our supervision. We keep the contract within a very professional way, that we have a small portion of, we call it admin fees for the NGO. So the NGO will make little amounts on top of the cost of the program. And we also created a national national network of volunteers who are young volunteers, are following the NGOs as well. So we give also the NGO a certain number of volunteers who are young people from the villages where those families are. So the NGOs are making part of the ecosystem, but they are inside the ecosystem of folks.
That's extremely interesting, and a number of different points that you touched upon. Thank you, Dr. Atif. There's a number of questions in the chat box for you, but we'll have to come back to that in the Q&A.
Okay.
For now, please let's move to our next country experience, which is Mr. Yogesh Kumar is the Commissioner for the Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Scheme in the state of Uttar Pradesh in India. Mr. Kumar, we look forward to hearing your experience of the Public Works Program in India and its contribution to green jobs. Thank you, and over to you.
Thank you very much, Pooja. Thank you, Claudia. And I'm going to share my screen, and presentation will be visible too. I hope it is visible.
Yes, we can see it.
Okay,
perfect.
Right. Okay. Right. Thank you all. Mahatma Gandhi Narega is a scheme, a program which is running in India since 2006 onward, and it is covering to the tune of 200 million poor families in the rural areas. I'll be talking about northern province of India, which is called Uttar Pradesh. It is in English, it will be called Northern Province. It has Uttar Pradesh is one of the biggest province in the country. And on the scale of poverty, Uttar Pradesh stands at rank 3 after province Bihar and Jharkhand. Uttar Pradesh has 75 districts. It has 58,000 village councils, 826 developmental blocks, and we generally support to the tune of 90 million to 110 million rural household by this program. The rough statistics of Uttar Pradesh, like 17% of the total population lives in Uttar Pradesh. Then we are closer to 32% of European population, and United States, if we see, to 74% almost of United States population. We are, in terms of area, Uttar Pradesh, the northern province, is equal to the area of United Kingdom. Then this Mahatma Gandhi Narega scheme was launched in 2006. And in northern province of India, it is implemented in all 75 districts, administrative districts, since 2008. In this scheme, 100 days unskilled employment is provided to any household which is willing to work, and almost $3 per day to the household is provided. The amount of work done by a woman is 1.23 cubic meter of soil displacement, soil digging, and 1.38 cubic meter for a man. So we provide them $3, and it helps in the rural area to maintain a wage rate as well. Agricultural wage rate are generally fluctuating in all parts of the country, but Mahatma Gandhi Narega has helped in maintaining the lowest, the threshold limit of the wage, and generally the agricultural wages are higher than Mahatma Gandhi Narega's wages. This way, it impacts the poverty and the prevalence of poverty in these areas, and it contributes more money flows into the laborers' household which are working in Mahatma Gandhi Narega. If we see the coverage in last 6 years, from in 2017-18, it was 4.86 million families which got employment in northern province, and it has risen to 9.44 million. It is 9.5 almost million in 2020-21. It is almost double what is used to be 3 years back. It was because of the COVID. It was a COVID year. It was a watershed in the entire world. Then we have been touching, like this scheme has been touching 7.78. For this financial year is starting with 1st of April 2022, and 9 months almost are over, 8 months are over. So we have already provided 6 million household the employment under Mahatma Gandhi Narega, and I am expecting this will touch almost to the tune of 8.5 million household will be again working under this scheme. Okay. There is some, I think, am I audible to Pooja? Am I audible to you?
Yes, we can hear you.
I think there is some issue. I'll stop and then again I'll reshare it. Presentation actually is halted. The screen is visible? All right, it is working.
Yes.
Yeah, it is working now. The scale of Mahatma Gandhi Narega is like measured in terms of percentage generated. In 2017-18, it was just 1/3. If we see 2.5 times of what we are selling now, it was just 99 million. Now it has reached to 3 years back to 284 millions, then 194 and 229. Means this much volume of work in single province of India has been done under Mahatma Gandhi Narega. I'll be focusing exclusively on natural resource management. I will not be focusing on the individual assets which have been created under Mahatma Gandhi Narega, be it horticulture assets or be it animal husbandry assets. They are also working because the mandate was economic inclusion and natural resources. So I'll be like talking on that. Then expenditure, if we see, it was 714 million US dollar in 2018-19, then went to 740, then 1575 million US dollars. This time it is closer to 1 billion US dollar in the current year, and we are like targeting it will go even further of that. Most of the funds are like to the tune of 60 to 70% of this entire expenditure goes through the DBT to the laborers' accounts, and remaining 30% goes for the construction of durable assets, which are the concrete constructions. This scheme in northern province of Uttar Pradesh is supported by almost 40,000 contractual staff of different rank and file, and almost 15,000 government employees, which include gazetted officers, senior rank officers, which are posted at the administrative district, block level, and Gram Panchayat level. So this single program is supported by to the tune of 55,000 to 56,000 staff, which are regularly trained, which are sensitized vis-a-vis the needs of poor, vis-a-vis needs of Divyangs, those are physically challenged, and vis-a-vis needs of women. I'll be like these the kind of work which Mahatma Gandhi Narega does in India. And if we try to scale up like from Uttar Pradesh, how India is performing, so we have to multiply it by 8. It means Uttar Pradesh is generally 12% of the entire budget of India and entire activities. So under Mahatma Gandhi Narega Act, which is a legislation passed by Parliament of India, 264 kinds of work can be carried out, which includes the hilly areas, coastal areas, specialized work, and the plain areas. Out of these 264, 182 type of works are related with soil conservation, water conservation, and air conservation, like plantation work, etc. This will include the community works also, as well as the individual works. Then 85 works are exclusively for the purpose of water resource management, water conservation. These include like check dams, soak pits, rooftop rainwater harvesting, ponds, reservoirs, like RRPs, river rejuvenation projects. Bigger rivers have been taken, barns, plantation, etc. These are for last 6 years. You can see that last column, which shows the number of work which have been taken under water conservation, water like shed development, irrigation, water bodies, renovation, have almost doubled in last 6 years. And we are planning to even make it double than what it is today. It was 60,000 in 2017-18, and in 2022, it is 132,000. And in the COVID year, we touched 153,000. So in total, it has been 634,000 so far. These 4 category works have been taken under this plan. Central government, under the leadership of our Honorable Prime Minister Mr. Narendra Modi, in this financial year launched Amrit Sarovar project. The project target was to create minimum 75 ponds in each district of country we have 75 districts, so we were supposed to create almost 5,200 ponds, but we targeted that we will create at least one pond in one village council, and we have 58,000 village councils. So we were from target of 5,200, we have shifted it to 58,000. The map, the blue color dots which are visible on this, these show the geospatial location of a pond. So you can see all entire map of the UP is covered with these ponds which have been dug. This is the kind of like, you can see on the right hand side, the photographs of the pond. The size of pond is almost 1 acre. And Uttar Pradesh stand first in the country in creating the ponds in number of and starting the works in this Amrit Sarovar. These are, we are investing almost in terms of INR, if I calculate, almost 2.5 million Indian rupee to maybe 3.5 million Indian rupee for per pond. And these are a national asset which will be culturally celebrated by the village communities. Then these are river rejuvenation projects which are running in Uttar Pradesh in northern province. 2018 and 19 we started as experimental mode. It was only 6 rivers were taken. Then it increased to 19, 25. Then this year almost 75 rivers have been taken. And the total expenditure so far made on these river rejuvenation is 17.1. And these institutions like IIT Kanpur and IIT Roorkee, BBAU, Lucknow University, IIT BHU, GIZ, they have also taken in 12 districts and 14 rivers for the purpose of technical convergence and technical support. And on the left hand side, it is a district Chitrakoot in Uttar Pradesh, river Mandakini. The white portion of the river shows the quality or maybe the amount of sand that was in 2017. And then 2019, after river rejuvenation project was carried out, so you can see the amount of water, that black portion has increased. The black color represents the water availability in the river. So this kind of, we have secured international national attention also for this work under Mahatma Gandhi Narega. The IEC program, like educating the schools, children, or maybe rural youth or women living in the rural areas through wall paintings, through color creatives, are massively carried out in the parts of Uttar Pradesh. And every year, a lot of fund is also spent on this. So we are through these programs, we are able to see people's participation and CSOs and NGOs participation for the implementation of this program. Then plantation is one more activity in which we are targeting that we should cover all the areas, all the patches which are government lands, and as well as we cover all the agriculturists also, these farmers in the private capacity and give them the plants. So far in last 6 years, under only Mahatma Gandhi Narega, in northern province, in the Uttar Pradesh province, 456 million saplings have been planted. Other than this, through other departments and through forest and environment department, another 450 million have been planted only in Uttar Pradesh. So the task which we are carrying out, this entire operation, is very, very huge. And we know we have capacity, limited capacity also, like supervising and looking after the, there are issues of survivability of these plants. But I'm sure, I know, with meticulous planning, the survivability also can be easily ensured. This is, other than RRP, other than the ponds, other than those water bodies, this is a third area which is massively supporting the climate risk mitigation, and which is helping us in creating a good green belt and green cover in our state. Then to support to the women through this program is like citizen information boards, which are put at work site. So that is almost 6.7 million USD US dollar have been paid so far to the SHGs through requesting them to make the citizen information boards for the work site of Mahatma Gandhi Narega. Then total employment for the women which has been given is 2.69 million women so far have worked, and 232 million USD in wages this has have been distributed. Bank correspondent Sakhi is the latest intervention for the dispersal of wages at the work site. So through commissions, through the dispersal, there is a part of commission which goes to bank correspondent Sakhi. It is 28.79 million US dollar have been distributed, have been given to the distributed by the bank Sakhis, the wage amount, and it's a part of it has gone to their accounts also as their commission, as their contribution. Then women supervisor, Mahila Mate is a women supervisor on the work site of Manrega, which is appointed at every 20 laborers of Mahatma Gandhi Narega. So almost 20,000, it is 19,328, almost 20,000 women supervisors have been deployed so far in Uttar Pradesh, and to the tune of 7.5 million, little more than 7.5 million US dollars have been distributed as wages for them. Training, like capacity building, upgradation of this Mahatma Gandhi Narega workers, of women, and it is like through different programs. Unnati. Okay,
Mr. Kumar,
right.
I'm sorry to come in, but could you
give
wrap
me 1
up
minute
a little
only.
quickly, please? Thank you.
Give me only 1 minute. So this is the last slide. Mahatma Gandhi Narega is working with Goat Trust of India, which is promoting goatery. We are also working in lemongrass, Pamarosa, bamboo plantation, medicinal aromatic plants. Then beekeeping is not permissible so far, but on other schemes, beekeeping has been like made a part. NGOs, FPOs, SHGs, CSOs are also coming in gradually, and they are also like strengthening our hand. Department of Horticulture, Agriculture, Minor Irrigation, then animal husbandry, then livelihood missions, etc. So we are in close convergence with all these departments, and government is also deploying research fellows and employing the universities to see the impact of Mahatma Gandhi Narega's expenditure on the environment, as well as on the safety of the laborers, as well as on the women empowerment. So this is from my side, and thank you very much for the patient hearing. I'm sorry if I overshot the time, and most welcome any question if there are.
Not at all. Thank you so much, Mr. Kumar. There are some questions in the chat box, and I'm sure those on the panel have some as well. It's an impressive, operating at impressive scale and breadth of experience. But I think we'll keep that for the Q&A for now, and move directly to our next speaker, if that's okay. Our next speaker is Mr. Christian Bordewijk from the World Bank. Christian is the practice manager for social protection and jobs in Western and Central Africa, and will be sharing the experience from Sahel, but more broadly, adaptive social protection in the bank. Thank you, Christian. Over to you.
Thanks a lot, Pooja. Thanks a lot for having me at this this panel. So I'm going to discuss a little bit, what we see as the role for adaptive social protection in the context of the climate crisis. And I effectively have three points to discuss. So first of all, why do we care? And I think others have made reference to the extent of the crisis that we face. The evidence is clear that the climate crisis is impacting the poorest and the most vulnerable disproportionately, both in terms of the sudden climate shocks like floods, and the slow onset climate shocks like droughts. And so climate change is really has to be seen as a major disruptor of development, undermining poverty reduction, undermining human capital formation, all of that, what we care about is being disrupted. And why is that? Well, it's because poor households have trouble coping with these shocks. They adopt damaging coping strategies like cutting back on food consumption, selling productive assets that help in generating income, or taking children out of school. In some contexts, taking girls out of school in particular. And because climate shocks are increasingly frequent, no longer once in a decade, but kind of almost every year, relying on humanitarian aid alone is not a strategy that is fit for the future. So countries really need to build national capabilities to adapt. And here is where, and that's my second point, where adaptive social protection comes in, because it's a first line of defense. It's a first line of defense because it is aimed at building resilience amongst poor and vulnerable households to such shocks. So cash transfers, for example, that are accompanied by productive economic inclusion programs are critical in promoting sustainable and diversified livelihoods. Diversified livelihoods because they enable poor households to diversify out of climate-sensitive activities, for example, complement rain-fed agricultural activities with other activities, either in agriculture or outside of agriculture. We've seen globally a significant increase in interest in adaptive social protection, of course, fueled by the experience from COVID-19, when all of a sudden there was a major shock that impacted the poor disproportionately, and where there was an urge to respond and to make, in particular, cash available to poor households who were no longer able to engage in economic activities, go to markets, etc., that had been closed. Adaptive social protection is a space of intense innovation, like how to respond to shocks fast and at scale, how to build resilience of households ex ante, so as to when shocks hit, their impact is less severe. And we can illustrate that with the example from the Sahel. So the Sahel is a region that is particularly vulnerable to the impacts of climate change, where global warming is progressing faster than elsewhere around the world, and where rising temperatures and heat come together with variability in rainfall, and also changing seasonality, which results in flooding, in greater desertification, and also degradation of land. And again, in the Sahel, we have strong evidence that poor households cope very poorly to these shocks. So in 2014, with support from our bilateral partners, we launched what we call the Sahel Adaptive Social Protection Program, which is aimed at supporting countries in strengthening their adaptive social protection systems. Countries in the Sahel, including Burkina Faso, Chad, Mali, Mauritania, Niger, and Senegal, where I'm based and where I'm joining you from. And so we have support from Germany, the United Kingdom, France, Denmark. And with this support, with this program, we've been able to advance knowledge on how to design and deliver adaptive social protection programs, but also to invest in systems and support countries in operating adaptive SP programs at scale, including economic inclusion programs, which we have evaluated in a multi-country randomized control trial impact evaluation to show which packages and which approaches work. So, from that work, we know that adaptive social protection works. So, for example, from Niger, we have evidence that shows significant resilience impacts of cash transfer programs, in particular when they're augmented by economic inclusion programs. And so the economic inclusion programs that were rolled out across the region involve community sensitization on aspirations and social norms, facilitation of savings groups, coaching on how to access markets and inputs, life skill training, micro-entrepreneurship training, and cash grants. These programs are mostly taken advantage of by women who self-select into these activities. And we're seeing a very nice effect of women becoming the engine of decisions around diversification of economic activity. So there's a women's empowerment dimension that comes together with the household climate shock resilience dimension. And so we've seen impacts on consumption, we've seen impacts on productive assets that households invest in, we've seen impacts on climate shock coping, and we've seen that these impacts are sustained. They're not short-term, they're sustained over many, many months. And we have evidence that these investments, these programs are cost-effective because the revenue that households generate from these activities are larger than the investments into these programs. We have this evidence out in scientific journals. There's a landmark paper that was published in Nature a few months ago, and it's ongoing work with new evidence that is coming out regularly. So it's an area of significant good news, and has impact on what we do and how we think about economic inclusion in the Sahel, but holds lessons much beyond Sahel. So third and final, where next? So I think we're at this point where we need to seize the moment from COP27. Kerstin mentioned at the beginning that it's been social protection got a lot of attention at COP27, more so than in the past, and I think that's for good reasons. These adaptive social protection programs have the potential to build long-term climate resilience because they support beneficiaries in the aftermath of climate shocks, but importantly, they help build their resilience ahead of time. And so What's needed is that collectively we recognize the power of adaptive social protection as a vehicle to protect the poor from the climate crisis. It's in many ways your number one no-brainer climate adaptation policy. It's a major opportunity for making loss and damage real. In many ways, climate adaptation starts here because it's focused on those most impacted by climate change. But it needs to be better understood. It needs to be more widely communicated. It needs to be more widely discussed beyond fora such as this, which bring together people who hold a technical interest in this. It needs to really be reflected much more widely. It's typically not reflected in nationally defined contributions, but it needs to be if it is to deliver what it can deliver. And then countries need to further build and reinforce their adaptive social protection systems and programs. There's a dimension of clarifying institutional frameworks, who's in charge and who coordinates what, in fact, is a very new and a multi-sectoral agenda. It's important to build delivery systems with large social registries of poor and vulnerable households, payment systems that enable to very quickly disperse support to beneficiary households, links to climate early warning systems, and then delivery capacity for economic inclusion programs at scale, because it's at scale where we need to deliver these programs, and adapted to different circumstances, rural, extreme poor contexts as much as urban context where flooding is a major source of problems. It can focus activities on climate friendly activities, and so there's a lot that can be done, that needs to be done in building systems and refining these programs. Data and technology is a facilitator, can help leapfrog. There are things that are possible now that weren't possible 5 years ago, and I think it's important to embrace this. And then there's a financial dimension. So I think there is a dimension of mobilizing domestic resources, and I think we've heard about that in the previous interventions. But also, I think there's room to leverage disaster risk financing for adaptive social protection, and Kerstin mentioned the Global Shield, which is a nice initiative that can help mobilize financing for adaptive social protection. So to close, ASP and economic inclusion is what is needed to respond to the climate crisis. It works. And I think there's a pretty clear path ahead. So it's just about getting on it. Thank you very much for giving me the floor. And apologies for the noise in the back.
No, thank you, Christian. And thank you also for highlighting the evidence that is emerging from Niger and other Sahel countries that really underpin that this approach works. And provides a lot of basis and support for other countries to take this up further. Thank you. I'd like to now open this up to questions from the audience. There's a number of questions already in the chat box, so we can start with that. And maybe we could start with Mr. Kumar, because there's some questions. We didn't have a chance to do this after your presentation, but there are some questions in the chat box specifically. There are a number of clarifying questions, but specifically, let's take up this issue of first, there's obviously great appreciation for all the work that's being done, both in terms of the quantity of work output and the nature, in terms, the river rejuvenation and so on and so forth. The question was in the chat box was, what measures are put in place to ensure that the work output is of high quality and monitor? There's a response in the chat box on how that is done on the monitoring side. I'd like to add to that a little and ask, how do you look at the quality of the assets that have been created? So the water bodies or the watersheds that have been built, how do you really evaluate the quality of these assets? How long-lived are these going to be? What kind of maintenance might be needed? Because that's really the next step forward for green public works is to really build sustainable, long-lasting assets. So over to you, Mr. Kumar. Thank you.
Yeah, there are 3-4 questions which I could see. Mr. Abubakar Usman asked about what is the rate of wage and externally funded, whether it is externally funded or it is funded by the government of India. Stephen Beryl asked about quality of assets. So I'll start with Abubakar Usman's. The wage rate is almost $3 per day. and we provide 100 days of employment in a year. And these 100 days, like to the tune of, like, say $300, and in INR it will be 21,000 rupees. And it is completely funded by Government of India. It is partly funded by the state governments, and there is no external aid being provided to this scheme. It was designed completely within India, and like so far no external aid has been received, be it for the running of the program or for the evaluation. And as far as quality of assets are concerned, the most of the assets are generally soil related, generally raw soil related assets. Few funding is there, almost to the tune of 22 to 25%, maybe 30% at time, which through which these durable assets by concrete, using of cement, using of brick mortars, those assets are made. Those are generally to the of the nature of community halls, maybe Anganwadi, those maybe like Panchayat Bhavans, village council buildings, then some check dams, maybe some goat sheds, poultry sheds, or fish drying yards. So there are stages of giving a technical sanction, administrative sanctions, and financial sanctions. For the purpose of transparency, the Citizen Information Board is placed on the asset so that the duplication or any kind of a communication gap can be stopped at the local level. And engineers have been deployed, starting with from the village council level, technical assistants, which are polytechnic or maybe ITI, which is a diploma in India, and to the rank of BTAC, which are working at the block level, and senior engineers at the administrative district level. So these engineers, they look after the quality of asset, and any asset is geotagged and photographed thrice during its lifetime, like during its construction period, like before the work, what was the condition of asset, be it a pond or be it a construction asset, like a concrete asset, during the construction period, and after, once the construction has taken place, what actual form the asset has taken. So 3 photographs are uploaded on the website called Bhuvan, which is being maintained by ISRO, Indian Space Research Organization, and it is completely in the public domain. Anybody can see those assets. One question came from Mohammed Tamadi, which is regarding CIB board and SHG, the self-help groups, how they are interacting and how we are paying, what mechanism we have devised. CIB board cost, we make 2 kinds of CIB boards. One cost 3,000 rupees, and if I calculate in terms of like 3,000 divided by 75, will come into it will be in a USD, and other CIB board does cost 5,000 Indian rupee. And these we generally start in Uttar Pradesh. We start to the tune of 250,000 to 300,000 assets every year, and we see that on all these assets, the CIB board needs to be placed, and almost I can say I should say 20 almost maybe 250 million rupees. I'm just not able to calculate in terms of USD, but it's a huge amount. Like if we calculate 3,000 rupees with 2.5 million assets, so that huge amount comes, which directly goes to the SHG. It's a new business which has been created for the purpose of transparency, because local authorities were not putting these CIB boards due to various reasons. So this has introduced the transparency, as well as it has given a work to SHGs also. They have come like in an active business mode with Mahatma Gandhi Narega. So it's a very, very healthy like collaboration with the SHGs. And one question is regarding age sensitivity. I could not understand that question. Maybe it is perhaps for some other speaker. So
I think yes, that Pooja, was for Sahil. Thank you very much, Mr. Kumar.
Thank you, Pooja. Thank you, Pooja.
Dr. Atif, there was a couple of clarificatory questions for you, but I think they were answered in the chat box. The main question we'd like to hear from you, Dr. Atif, is there was a question on targeting between, so how is eligibility determined for the Karama Takaful program and for Forza? And the way that you do this, does this help you actually to layer on the productive inclusion on the cash transfer?
Yeah, thanks, Abuja, for the question. In fact, as I mentioned quickly, we have a huge database of about 40 million individual currently who are 50% of them are getting Takafa and Karama. Takafa and Karama are two programs, one for the solidarity and one for the disabled people or orphan. Probably getting the database will enable us to know exactly where are the pockets of poverty on that territory, on the governorates. And based on the pocket of poverty where we know exactly where the accumulation of people, will start to study by a quick market survey or assessment of the wherever people are existing. So what are the major source of projects and intervention for economic inclusion? So our targeting policy is very simple. We do have two lists of exclusion and inclusion criteria. We select people from age very vast, from 19 until 55 years old. We get priority for women, about 50%, 30% youth, and 5% people with disability. Bearing in mind that we give them kind of 6 months of not excluding from the welfare of social protection system. So we give them either job or asset transfer, but we keep them within the welfare system for a period of not less than 6 months. So we give them the chances to go through. We select also among the families. As you know, we have big families in our area. So we select one representative per family, per household, but we can find a lot of jobs. We can provide more jobs per family, but one is only subsidized because we give subsidy either by the cost of job creation or the asset transfer. We give per individual about $1,000, the total cost of the intervention. And as I mentioned in my presentation, we have three categories of either loan or partially grant and loan or grant. So it depends on the level of poverty. We select the ultra poor. 70% of all our program are targeting ultra poor. And the target is to graduate them from the listing of social protection. So we start already with certain people who are in the list now to be graduated from the first batch of the implementation. But we have also poorer and poor people who are in the margin of getting full subsidized loan. We call it Card Hassan or partially loan and grant. So we have within the exclusion and inclusion criteria, we have also the services, which goes well.
Thank you very much. That was extremely clear.
Thanks.
I want to move a little bit from the programming to the big question of financing. Where does the money come from? We heard already from Egypt and India on sources of domestic financing, but maybe I could ask this question from Kirsten and Christian a little bit on, you mentioned the links to disaster risk financing and Global Shield. Could you talk us through a little bit on the opportunities there are to leverage these sources of financing, particularly climate resilient economic inclusion? And if you could also bring in any implications or relevance from the recent agreements on loss and damage. So maybe if we could start with you, Kirsten, and then move to Christian. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Pooja, for this question. Very, very difficult question. And as I'm from the social protection unit within BMZ, not working with the climate change division, my answer would be just a small part of the entire story. We regard the integration of social protection into the Global Shield as a big chance to also work on this issue. But I think we should really look and go at the country level while we're working together with Pathfinder countries to first see what is really the demand for having social protection as a part of the entire approach towards climate change adaptation and climate risk financing. So I cannot provide the big answer, but I would say that it depends very much on what is being needed and wanted at partner country level, and then develop there what would be an appropriate answer to find the relevant financial contributions. So I think I can just add this idea to the discussion. I'm sorry for this. Thank you.
Thank you, Kirsten. It's not an easy question at all, and I'm sorry to put both of you on the spot on this.
It's a relevant question, so
if you would have the answer, I think we wouldn't need to look any further. But Christian, do you want to venture a try? Well,
so it's the $100 billion question, right? As it were. So I think, first of all, let's put the source of financing to the side for a second. I think it's clear that countries can plan with domestic resources for the types of shocks that are of low intensity and high frequency, because they're predictable, right? I think what's much harder is for the lower frequency but higher impact shocks, where you effectively need some form of pre-positioned financing that you can draw on, when such shocks hit. And I think every country in the world is different, has its particular risk profile. And I think what needs to happen is for countries to analyze their risk profile and have their own specific strategy for how to finance this particular risk profile. And it's going to be a mix of domestic resources. It's going to be a mix of pre-positioned financing resources. There are financial products that are available or that can be developed. So I think it's important to do that, to recognize that, in fact, to recognize that relying on humanitarian aid is no strategy for the future. And believe me, there are still a lot of countries that think along those ways, right? And so I think it's important to recognize that we are no longer, that the future looks very different from the past, and it looks very different from the present. And that's why it's important to think ahead and build these strategies and reflect on a diversified portfolio financing for this. And then secondly, it's important to link this to adaptive social protection, right? So mobilizing financing maybe is one thing, but if you don't have the systems to absorb this financing and get it to the people who are impacted, then what's the point, right? So I think it's important to build these systems, and that's what we're talking about, right? How do you build economic inclusion programs? How do you build shock responsive cash transfer programs that can operate at scale? How do you identify people? How do you have the information that you need on households in order to be able to support them, to build financing, to build payment systems that allow to get cash to people when they need it. So those are the things that need to happen. And then it's important that in the broader discussion that we are going to have over the next few months at the global level, in terms of what do we mean by loss and damage, a loss and damage fund? What do we mean by vehicles to promote loss and damage? That we recognize adaptive social protection within that context. And I think we have some way to go to do that. And I think the point on whether adaptive social protection is reflected in NDCs across countries is, I think, an important one. It's important for ministers of environment to become conversant on adaptive social protection, for the line ministries that are in charge of adaptive social protection to engage ministries of the environment, to engage ministries of finance, in order to come together with a strategic agenda that countries can pursue.
Thank you, Christian. Thanks also for sort of broadening that question out to other aspects that we need to consider. And I want to build on that and turn to Dr. Atif and to Mr. Kumar to help us think about this idea of building a coalition of support for the programs that you are ongoing. I don't mean just the financing aspect. I'm thinking more also in terms of the partnerships and coordination with other government agencies that are necessary to incorporate climate elements into the work that you do. I think, Dr. Atif, you mentioned that the Ministry of Social Solidarity is itself transforming itself to reflect its new role. Mr. Kumar, I think in India, the Ministry of Rural Development leads MG and Reg. So just thinking about how that role expands to coordinate with other ministries to deliver to build these systems to be able to absorb the financing that comes in and to build this coalition for support. Be very interesting to hear your perspectives on that. Maybe we could start with Dr. Atif and then move to Mr. Yogesh, Mr. Kumar. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks for the question. I'm just, comment of what Christian just mentioning that, the question of not specifically the fund and the money. The question become now is the know-how and the expertise. And the answer to your question is very important, because I feel that we have to stop produce new poor, and particularly if climate change is coming and the poor countries are the most, among the most 10 countries who are affected by climate change. There are about 8 countries in the poorer countries. So probably the answer that we have to scale up the models which we are trying to do using the RCT. We invested a lot of money, let's say, in terms of countries like Egypt, in refining a model and refining the targeting strategy, with linking the database with rapid market assessment for the ground where people are. That kind of know-how now is one of the most important assets we can share. I mean, probably the coalition between the Ministry of Environment, Ministry of Finance, Ministry of Social Solidarity, as example, might be replicable, and the collaboration in the coming era will be, as climate change is affecting most of our continent. I mean, Africa continent, the South America, the India, and all this Asian part. So probably the models developed in those countries are one of the assets to be shared, not only the money, because we will be working in an era where adaptive social protection will be the model. I guess out of this session, we might think about the real expression mentioning adaptive social protection might be the tool and the platform which you can provide for the poorer countries, hands in hand with the money, that reform your social safety net to make it more workable with the climate change threats. So instead of giving only cash transfer, why you don't give, as we try to do, some livestock? Why we don't put livestock together to make a massive production? Why you don't make a link with private sector in those countries, so you can, instead of working, poor people are just making small amount of money, they can make higher amount of money, they can go for higher jobs in green business. So probably the coalition between the countries who are developing successful models, but also through a PI or your team or some leadership, it might be replicable and scale it up, because what we have now in front of us, that we have to scale up the initiatives. We are not in the time where we will wait until the cycle of climate change will come and we have the new next crisis. Probably we can start by finding the most workable and transportable model, where based on randomized test and some scientific background, but it might be also scale it up depending on the circumstances of the countries and the market-driven forces, wherever we talk about in Africa or in other countries. So probably it is a great question that we have quickly to scale it up and to collaborate, to exchange and share the knowledge and know-how. Thanks. Back to you, Abhijit.
Thank you, Dr. Atif. Mr. Kumar?
Okay. Actually, in my judgment, how Indian government is responding and the state governments are responding, they are trying to tap all kinds of leakages which are happening, be it in social protection schemes, be it in food and civil supplies, be it in Narega. And by introducing those direct benefits transfer, we are able to save billions of dollars so far. And those billions of dollars can be definitely used for productive purposes. And means I cannot like provide you ready record right now how many like colors have been saved, but we are on that path. And everywhere in the entire country, there is a mission that everything will be transparently placed, and the beneficiary who was supposed to get the fund money of for a particular purpose, exactly that beneficiary will get that money. Then, as the other speakers pointed out, the targeted approach of experts, the kind of assets we need to build for the purpose of drought, or be it flood, or be it earthquake or cyclones, and all the kind of that those assets. Many a time, the local engineers and maybe local people are not aware of the international standards or the researches which are taking place at international level. If those can be shared, if those can like be made part of the counseling or maybe training of these local engineers and those village council heads, that can also go a long way in making a one-time asset that will take a bit of more fun, but which will be useful, which will not like erase from the scene every 2 years or every 3 years. So that expertise needs to be like pulled in. Then for the purpose of like social security, already in India, there are a lot of schemes and a lot of programs for the social security, like one building and other construction welfare board is there, in which we have almost 1.3 to 1.4 million of Manrega laborers are already registered with this building and other construction welfare, which is giving 360-degree life supporting schemes in almost 10 schemes, 10 programs, and starting with the childbirth till the death of a person, and a lot of for the purpose of education, technical education, etc. They provide complete package, and it is completely funded from this labor department. So those kind of schemes, I find that the social security in India is adequate. Only thing is to implement it properly. Then focus on for the purpose of livelihood and income generating, like focus on animal husbandry, be it horticulture, then floriculture, aromatic plants, Ayurvedic plants, and even in this like animal husbandry, there are bigger animals, smaller animals, hens, then fishes, etc. So this is absolutely diversified kind of field, like agriculture allied sector, in which there can be a lot of leverages, a lot of milestones we can comfortably achieve. So because we are a landlocked state, northern province is a landlocked state, we don't face much of a problem towards from the coastal sides. So we, though I'm a little bit aware of what problems lie in maybe in Sahel or the coastal area of country, but we have different kind of challenges here. Challenge is more of a poverty and a leakages. So we are on the way of like eliminating them, and sometimes floods from in the rivers which are coming from Nepal side. So we face like problem of the floods, and like some problem, I will say a couple of districts face drought. But in my estimation, if we work in a concerted manner, within the period of 2-3 years, we'll be able to like find out effective solution from within the resources we have within the country. And any external aid which is coming to which that creates a competition among the nations. If at all World Bank or UNICEF or maybe United Nations start providing aid to the neighboring countries, so pressure comes on us also as an official who are running the scheme. So why don't you? Are you not getting any kind of aid from United Nations or World Bank? So we also go and take our proposals, give us also the aid, and we showcase as if we are like having a positive. Every country is having a positive fund, but this like providing external aid should be taken with a pinch of salt. And wherever it is actually indispensable, there that external aid should reach, not like liberally, which otherwise it creates a like atmosphere of competition. Everybody goes and they demand some sort of aid from World Bank and donor agencies, which is not a healthy thing. Which I'll say means, frankly, I'll say which is not a healthy thing. Which we face this problem almost every year here. Whenever free aid is coming, so there is a competition kind of thing. So this is like from we in my estimation, we are self-sufficient in terms of various corners. If at all technical side comes, if at all a minor of like target-based like support comes, that is going to enrich us.
Thank you, Mr. Kumar. And I think it's interesting also hearing very different perspectives of where different countries are in their approach to financing domestic and external. So that was an interesting perspective to hear. I would like to close this out. It's been a fascinating discussion. I think none of us are ready to leave, but I hope this is also an impetus to do this again, because there were some of the questions in the chat box really highlighted that this is such a nascent agenda, right? There were questions on how do you link humanitarian cash with national systems, deliveries, turning really to digital ID and payment systems for delivery, thinking about drawing lessons from evidence and using that to inform climate resilient economic inclusion, thinking about how all of this works in diverse contexts. So I think, there was so much interest in the chat box on all of these questions that could be a topic of a whole other session. So let me close that out now. Thank you very much for your time to the panel and to the participants. Please don't go before filling out our poll. The options, the question is, would you use the ideas and materials from this session for your future work? You strongly agree, neither agree nor disagree, disagree or strongly disagree. And the second question is, would you recommend this series of webinars to your colleagues? So please do let us know what you think about this session and the series overall before you leave. And thank you very much to our wonderful speakers. We will be calling you back, I'm sure, for another round because it doesn't look like we are done working on this yet. Thank you.
With pleasure. Yeah, thanks a lot. Thank you.
Thank you, Pooja. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye. Thanks, Pooja. Bye-bye.
Thanks to everybody.